Hello, welcome on the first live Q&A for the Architecture Weekly. I'm extremely happy, thrilled that we managed to get into that because it's so exciting that Architecture Weekly is going on for almost 2 years, and today we celebrated the 100th edition. And because of that, I wanted to have a bit of fun, answer live some questions and answers. Many people were asking, many we could do such a form. So feel free to ask any questions via the YouTube chat and tell me if it's everything is going fine. Can you hear me? Can you see me? So all of that. Welcome. And let's start. At first, I will start with the questions that I got through the Google form. You can still send me the question through that, or you can just write me on the chat window. So let's start with the first question. What resources about clean architecture, DDD, do you recommend for Python developers? Ideally with code samples in Python. So in general, we'll get to that later probably, but I'm not a huge fan of clean architecture, and Uncle Bob works because he's not my uncle, and I think that having this layered approach is not the best that we could get in the software industry. So I might not be the best person to recommend some works about clean architecture, but about DDD, I don't think that there is anything special in Python or any other technology around DDD, because DDD is just a general approach of building applications that are close to the business. So getting understanding of the business process, talking with the business experts, the same language. So that's something that is, in my opinion, universal. But if I would recommend something for Python developers, I'm not Python developer, I'm just Python noob. So again, I will search for something and publish that through some sources. But for sure, there is a person that I could recommend to watch out. It's John Bywater. He wrote a book about event sourcing in Python, and he also sharing samples in PyEvent sourcing library and GitHub. So in general, he's a really good person to watch for, especially that he likes to share the knowledge, and there is many overlap between event sourcing and DDD. Of course, you can do event sourcing without all of the DDD tactical patterns. Sometimes they are kind of not effective if it's working with the event sourcing. But still, I think that it's worth checking out. And about DDD, I think that I would recommend everything that Matthias Veres is writing. It's really sane approach, and he's also explaining like the generalist approach and understanding of the domain. For sure, Eric Evans' book. Of course, this is not the easiest book to read, but so you can maybe start with maybe some of his talks. I like to get back to his talks because each time I see them, then I'm finding some new bits of information. What's more, for sure my blog, but I don't have many samples about Python yet, although I'm thinking about porting some of my event sourcing samples. So if there is interest and someone would be open on helping me to do that, I'm open for collaboration. Hello, Unite, and hello, Ivan. I hope that the echo is kind of usable. I'm not sure where it comes from. So unless it is like not possible or too invasive, then I would probably continue as it is. So sorry for that. This is the first time that I'm doing the streaming through OBS, so I hope that I will get better next time. So that's all about Python. Sorry about not having enough details, but I will try to search for that more and probably publish through either Twitter or LinkedIn, or you can contact me directly with through the email. Okay, next one. Hi Oscar, I've been reading your newsletter for the last few months. It gives me unique insights that are unmatched. Thank you. I've been a cloud engineer for a while, and I like to move into a cloud architect position, design, architect, and assist customers with AWS services, pre-sales, post-sales, whatever possible. What would you advise that I do? What would be the roadmap and crucial lessons for me to learn to make the shift smoothly? Yeah, that's a good one. I think that what I would recommend is to probably work on your soft skills, because I can imagine that if you are working as a cloud engineer for some time, then you should already have enough skills and enough capabilities to deal with the technical aspect of that. And I also started my journey as a developer, and for quite a long time I was mostly focused about the technical aspect of the software engineering. But then I found out that if we are only focusing on the technical aspect, then we can't have enough impact of the products that we are building as we could have if we were kind of leaning a bit into maybe not manager part, but at least the product development part. So I think that reading some books about the soft skills, like or something between soft skills and technical aspect. So like there is a nice book by Gerald Weinberg, Becoming Technical Leader, and he also have a few books like the one about the consultant and also the general introduction to system thinking. So that's something, the Gerald Weinberg's books, for sure I would recommend, because it's a good information and explanation of how to think and how to tackle the project issues. So how to think out of the box, etc. Regarding talking with customers, etc., I think that that's something that you just need to start to be doing. Maybe a good way is to, before you jump into the full role and you fully focus and try to get the bigger deals, then you can start in working in some community. By working, I mean probably you have already some interest and some stuff that you know that you are good at and that you can help people. So maybe joining some Discord channel, or finding the place where you can meet those people and see what are their issues and what they are asking about, and trying to help them. That's something that you could start learning how to solve issues, how to talk with people, because that's not so easy as it might look like. Because you need to learn how to not put people into the defensive mode, how to ask questions, and and trying to understand the other perspective. So yeah, for sure I would recommend just focusing on the general aspect and still, of course, continue to understand and learn the technical parts, but now looking from the more general perspective. So also there are good people to look for, and some books that you could find out, like Gregor Hoppe. He has a lot of materials about becoming cloud architect, and for sure his works are also valuable, and I could recommend them. Yeah. So if you have more questions, then if you're live, then you please write me on the chat, or if not, then feel free to write me, and I will try to also answer the follow-up questions. Okay, so the next question is in Polish, so I will try to translate that into the English. So at first there is I really value you and your work, and that you're getting your mark abroad, and Polish IT industry is pretty new, and there is a bit of a delay between the trends that we can see in Western countries and our country. And how do you see and how you compare the Western software development market to Polish market? And what are trends that you could see abroad, and how they would impact and how they get into the Polish market? Yeah, also good question. So for the people that are outside of Poland, then from my experience, I was also joking that we are in Poland like a software house of the for the Western countries. So typically, most of the projects that we do are either directly for customers, or there are some sort of outsourcing. In last years, so the time before I joined even StoreDB and before becoming the self-employed consultant, most of my projects were like we were doing hands-in-hands projects with other companies. So for example, some company needed help in delivering some part of the system, and my teams were involved as autonomous systems teams, and that were working hand in hand with the teams of the clients. So typically we were either building a part of system or getting more focus on some particular aspect of the system. So this is interesting, but still it's not like we can dictate or we can have the full control of the technical design. Even when I were an architect and part of the architect team, then it's not precisely the same experience as you could have if you are just employed directly in the product company. So from that angle, that's much different than the typical projects that I see in the Western countries. And when I'm talking a lot with the people from the DDD community or some more established architects, and I had the chance to do that when I was working at even StoreDB, then for them it's kind of not understandable how you could, being like a technical leader or architect, how you cannot have the enough authority to make such decision. So yeah, that's something that I don't typically like in our industry, because I think that in Poland we have a really huge amount of really good engineers and people that should get the bigger role, and because we don't have anything to be shy. In the most projects that I've been into, then most of them, I didn't see any difference in the skill set, etc. So I'm quite happy that it becoming more often that people like Wojtek Ptak, like he became a leader of the engineering in Revolut, or other people are getting more important roles in the outside of Poland. So that's looking promising, and I would expect that become more of a norm. If I see the trend, if I would need to find some trend to show. And but what I hope is that we in Poland we will be building also our products that will be going more global. So not only delivering something that someone else invited, but doing stuff more focused on what we are inventing. It's already happening. There are already sites like Landingi, etc., that went pretty global, but we still don't have any unicorn, or at least I don't know any. And so from my perspective, getting back directly to your question, is I think that we will get more and more authority, and we will be doing more projects that we have more option to make decision. And so that means, in my opinion, that we will be more focused on the product development and business part, which probably mean that domain-driven design will become more popular. And because to do domain-driven design properly and do products that are close to business, you need to have the chance to talk with the business people. So you need to be quite up in the hierarchy and have the decision-making option. So yeah, that's. I think that besides that, like technical part is that we are already doing a lot of cloud and huge variety of projects. But I think that this type of solutions, like more event-driven, more DDD, etc., will becoming more and more popular because the other trends we already adopted. I'm curious if there are also other people from the, maybe not from Poland or not from, but like from the mid Europe or Eastern Europe, if you have the same type of observations about your industry and the direction. If you have such, then yeah, also please share it on the chat window or ask any questions that when they pop out. Okay, the next one. How is it possible to become architect but stay away from management? All in all, architects role are expecting you to do some managerial stuff to some extent. So the short answer is that this is not possible. It's just not possible. I mean, it is possible in a way that if you are architect, then probably your core part of what you are doing shouldn't be like the HR related stuff. So, you know, managing people in the sense like signing the contracts, discussing contracts with them. But if you want to be an architect, then you need to have impact. And to have impact, you need to have the authority. And it's not possible to have authority just like on the technical part, but not having in mind what team or what organization are you working at. Because the good architecture is not created in a vacuum. So quite often when I was designing my systems, then I had to take into the account what skill set I have in my teams and what I'll be able to teach people, to coach people so they could get better and understand. and I also had to like sometimes drop the idea of using some technology because I knew that currently I don't have such skills and I won't have such skills in the near future. For example, I was working on the construction project management software, and one of my colleagues came with the idea of using event sourcing, and this was kind of matching from the business standpoint because we were the project management in construction industry means that you are doing a lot of paperwork, like discussing the changes in the construction project, etc. All of that needs to be formal. All of that is like a record of the discussions and the set of changes, and all of that needs to be audited. So that wasn't the worst idea. In fact, it was pretty good. But I was the only person that was doing event sourcing in past, and we had teams distributed in 2 continents and 3 different countries, which mean that I would be the only person at the beginning that would be teaching and helping people to understand that concept. And also I noticed that my friend also wasn't precisely thinking about event sourcing, more like event streaming. So the common misunderstanding about those two patterns, because event sourcing is about storing durable information, and event streaming is about data in motion, so moving data from one place to another. So having all of that, I was the first person to reject the idea of introducing event sourcing, because technically I wouldn't be able to pass that knowledge and make sure that everything is done properly and all people are on the same page. And we were already using document database, which like a document database for the document workflow, that sounds like a good matching. And yeah, it was good enough for us. So by being architect, you need to understand the organization that you are working in. You need to understand the skills of the people, and to be able to shape that aspect, you need to have the impact and work also together with the product team, with the HR, etc. It doesn't mean that you need to have all those tedious HR work, but still you need to be kind of manager, because you need to persuade people to understand your vision and buy their agreement into that. So it's kind of managerial role. But as I mentioned, it doesn't have to mean that you are like a project manager, etc. And yeah, in fact, that shouldn't be the core part of work for the architect, at least in my opinion. Okay, so thank you. Next question. Insights for designing workflow-based applications, like there will be states and valid actions for each request, and some users can only perform some actions. So I would need to get more details into that question to be sure that I understood that correctly. But in general, the workflow-based applications, for me, they are matching the idea of the event-driven systems. And typically, for me, those systems are like you are sending some command, so you are putting some intention of what you would be doing, then you are handling this command, and then as a result you are publishing event about the result, either success or failure. Then you can listen to those events and take another decision and send another comment to like do a multiple step workflow. So in a nutshell, that's how the Saga pattern and the process manager pattern works. check my blog, I explain that pretty deeply in the articles, and also for the paid subscribers there is a webinar recording where we modeled such business workflow, etc. But in general, you can think of it like you are sending comment, which is not much different from handling API request. Of course, that happens like in a background, typically. And you need to also be sure that those comments will reach the next like the handling service. So you need to take into an account some delivery guarantees, and that's where typically outbox patterns come into play, or that's why the messaging systems like Kafka, Rabbit, etc. are used to be sure that this workflow will be processed. Because the worst thing that can happen if the workflow is stuck in the middle. So you should be typically using some durable messaging to make sure that both comments and events will reach the interested parts. And once you have this guarantee, this is more like a technical aspect of it. You have also the business aspect. And for that, the most important is to talk a lot with the business people and understand the business workflow. And for that, really helpful can be exercises like event storming or event modeling, where you can shape and understand and have the collaboration between the business and you. And then as a result, you can design such event-driven workflow based approach. And if we want to know who did those actions and whether they can perform some actions, then this is kind of gray matter, because if it's a business rule, whether someone can perform some action or not, then I would typically model that as a part of the business process and design it as a regular workflow step that can be skipped, or some decision can be made to understand whether this user can perform that or not. I would treat it as a just different branch of the workflow. And the other aspect is something that is more generic. So by more generic, I mean that we just need to find out whether some user have the workflow or not, have the needed role and needed steps. So that's something that would be the most important. And for that, we could create some generic sidecar that we can plug into the command approach and then check generically whether user has permission or not. And we can also, typically, that generic part is sent with the message metadata, and that's how we can build some generic aspect of that. I think that's a good topic for a longer blog article or some video or some talk. So I hope that in a nutshell that give you the general understanding and enough insights, but feel free to reach me if that's not sufficient. Thank you for the question. And are there any viewers that would like to ask some question? I don't see much on the chat for now, so I will continue with the list of questions that I have on my Google form. So the next one, how many hours a week do you work? I will answer as consultant because it depends. So maybe just a longer answer, because many people tell me that I'm working so much and I'm publishing so many content, etc. And that's kind of true, but it doesn't have to mean that I need to spend like hell amount of time on doing them. I will get into that in a minute. So I can say that I was, or I still probably am, a workaholic, and I was really working too long, and that's not something that I think that I should be like explaining to and bragging to people that I'm working for a long time. Just to give you a notion, there was a time, I think a span of 2 or 3 years, I think 2 years, that I got like 220 hours per month in average, and that already includes some vacations and holidays, etc. So the typical amount of like daily amount of hours was much, much worse. I'm saying worse because that wasn't healthy, and that's something that I don't want to do anymore in any of my projects, because I think that in our industry the grind culture is really terrible. I wrote about that in the current architecture weekly release about the Tesla. So when I'm seeing that people are sleeping in the office, or they are getting some weird deadlines that are just gave because someone decided, like in this case Elon Musk, that just give the deadline just because they can, then that's not something that that I think that should be a standard in our industry. So in general, I think that right now I'm trying to work like 7 or 8 hours per day, and not anymore. I have a time that is I'm trying to keep fully focused on my family. So this is after 5 p.m. So this is something that I changed, and I think that the best is to work smart, not hard, and that's how I'm trying to do that for now. So yeah, I'm trying to not do overtime hours, but even when I'm working right now as self-employed consultant, then I'm also trying to keep my consistency. So write Architecture Weekly and my Polish newsletter every Monday, write a blog article every week, and then also do other stuff, so consulting, workshops, etc. that I'm doing. Sometimes, if it appears that I took too much for me, then of course I need to deliver, and that's where I'm working a bit longer, but then I'm trying to take some days off. But yeah, one of the reasons why I decided to go solo was that I also wanted to have more focus and be less stressed and more flexibility of what I want to work and how I want to work. So I really recommend to read the book Atomic Habits. It's a great book that explains how you can stack your small habits into something bigger. Like for example, my blog posts or my talks or my materials that I'm publishing. A lot of them I'm coming from the discussions with other people, and from what I see, from I'm just making notes of what I'm discussing with people. I'm trying to be really active in the community, to not lose the close touch with the community bit. And if you are stacking and you are making those notes and somehow categorizing those notes, then after some time you see that, okay, maybe I could do something bigger from that. So it's like if I try to write some extensive blog article, and some of my blog articles are pretty long, or create some big sample, or get the consistency to write 2 newsletters and 1 blog post every month, and I would every week, and I would start like from zero, then that wouldn't be possible. But if you get the habit, if you get the consistency, then you are getting better at it, and yeah, you don't need to work so much time. Yeah, I see, Shimon, that you already said, you also said that there is some echo. Yeah, I'm sorry, I won't be able to solve that, but I promise to get that better on the next session. Okay, do you have any questions? Feel free to write them on chat. If not, then I will just go ahead and continue with the next one from my list. And how do you prevent CQRS becoming a top-level architecture at the same time as building a task-based UI? Both these statements sound contradictory to me. So in my opinion, CQRS should be a top-level architecture pattern, and task-based UI matches the premises of the CQRS. Because in the task-based UI and in CQRS, the first thing that you should think of are what business operations do you need to have in your system. So the business operation is the first thing that you should model. So if you are building task-based UI, then that means that all of the operations are streamlined from the UI through the API and through the business logic. So in my opinion, that's precisely what CQRS is doing. Because in CQRS, we are slicing our architecture into the vertically based on the business operation. And not only by the business operation, but also the type of operation. So in CQRS, we have commands, and those are intentions of doing something in our system. So for example, issuing invoice, sending some attachment with an email, or any other operation that the intention is that some business logic will be run. And the other set of operations are queries. So when we need to get some information from our system, and I'm saying that business logic for commands, not writes, because they don't need to be technically storing anything in database. They could, for example, generate PDF or having some other on other aspect. And regarding, so in my opinion, that's really streamlined, and that's how it should be done. So yeah, I think that they are the same picture, in fact. So yeah. Okay, let's go into another question. Why Kafka is considered a bad storage for event sourcing? Remember you mentioning this on one of the presentation. If configure proper retention period, it seems a working solution. The most important thing why Kafka is not for event sourcing, because it's not like a general tool, a database. Of course, you can have and you can model, store technically even infinitely data on Kafka, but this is just a side effect of how Kafka was designed. Because Kafka was designed as a durable queuing system, messaging system. So in that regards, they added storage, but the storage is more here to have the delivery guarantee. So what we store, then our subscribers, so what we publish, then our subscribers will eventually get. So Kafka and others like Pulsar, NetStreaming, etc., they are tools that are built for moving data from one place to another. So that's the most important part here. And in my opinion, that doesn't mean that this should be used for event sourcing, because event sourcing is a storage pattern. So the main focus is on putting it as so event stores are databases. So they should guarantee like atomicity, like atomic operations, like atomic appends. They should support guarantees like read your own writes, and also the optimistic concurrency, because those are patterns that give you the certainty that if you are storing those information, then you can get it immediately, so you can make decision based on the current state. So for example, in Kafka, you can just publish and subscribe. You don't have even API like give me all events or give me all messages from the specific stream. And let's say that you could technically somehow tech around it by having some asynchronous API that is listening and waiting, but still there is a eventual consistency and there is a delay. And in Kafka, you don't have option to specify the expected offset. So to say that this is the version of the stream that I saw, and if there are new events in the stream, then you should not be appending this event, you should just throw exception. The only queuing system that I know that can do that is NAS streaming and Jetstream. So that's the only one. In Kafka, you have technically transactions, but they are not built from that, and you need to have a specific partitioning design to even be able to use them, because they are only working per partition. And on partition, as I recall there, you can you can also only have the 160,000 partition. So it's like a totally bike's heading of using Kafka. Maybe you could somehow build it, but it wouldn't be the best way, because you already have solutions and tooling like Marten, like even StoreDB, like Axon, that are built for event sourcing, and they are databases and not just the queuing system. And there is also another question right after that, is Debezium plus change detection capture on database better than event sourcing? So again, it depends. It might be better for some solutions, like if you don't need the extended diagnostic of event sourcing, if you just need to move data from one place to another, then maybe it's a good solution. But then if you still have the same database, then maybe it's better to just use the simple replication and not pipe data through queuing system. So Debezium is a tool that you can run on top of the change detection capture mechanism in the relational databases like Postgres, MySQL, MS SQL, and you can subscribe to notifications directly from database. If you are using Postgres, then Debezium allows you to plug into write-ahead log and get push-based notification from database. But again, it's about propagating information from your database, not about storing information. So moving data from one place to another. Debezium with CDC can be a really good combination for the microservices approach. Even can be used with event sourcing. If you have like Marten on the Postgres, then I also built a POC, there is on my GitHub, where Debezium is just pushing events forward to Kafka automatically and plugging into the Marten event store table. And moving data from one place to another. So this is just an orthogonal concept. You can use CDC with event sourcing. I even have the recently quite well read article how you can build your own in .NET in write-ahead using write-ahead log in Postgres. So it doesn't mean like it's one way or another. You can do both, or you can just store information in database and then propagate it if you don't want to use event sourcing. But it's hard to compare. It's like an oranges versus apples comparison. Next question. Yeah, sorry, Knight, I don't have any other video playing. I'm not sure what's happening. Yeah, sorry, maybe in post-production I will be able to somehow sort it out. Why use Java versus Go or another option in backend solutions? I'm not an expert in Go, and to be true, I appreciate Go a lot, but it always hurt my eyes when I see the syntax. So if there are any Gophers here, sorry for that, but I'm just frank. But jokes aside, I think that each technology is just a tool. I like to learn new languages. As you know, I have samples in my GitHub repositories in many languages. I'm also planning to learn Go or Rust. But of course, between all of those languages and all of those technology stacks, it's quite important to understand where they are best for. And even though you can get the same solutions in all of them, then sometimes they are better and more focused on some aspect. Like Golang is because of their simplicity and performance and efficiency is great for building the infrastructure tooling like DevOps stuff or platform that you can use for your inner system. Java, C#, etc. are more focused on like the writing syntax and being able to write business requirements in many ways. They also have their own stacks for even from the UI, etc. So that's how I envision them. And you might also have Rust, and Rust gives you the possibility to go even lower level and somehow connect those two words, and Golang similarly. So if I was choosing the tech stack, then for sure I would be basing that on what are the skills that I have in my company, what are the preferences of the people that they are working on, and I wouldn't just try to push people to change the stack, because I think that for this particular case it would be better, because as I said, in my opinion, most of the tech stacks right now, especially for creating business line application, can do similar stuff, but I think that I would base it on the preferences of the skills that I have and on the skills that I can get. So recently I had hot take on the Twitter when I read the Gergely Orosz take that he noticed that .NET is not used on the startups so much as other technologies. And this wasn't a great take from him, because he still believes that, or seems to believe that .NET is like a .NET framework days, that you can run it only on Windows, you need to buy all licenses, etc. That's not true anymore, but the conclusion was that I had to agree. So probably if I was building the startup right now, then I wouldn't use .NET. I would probably use Node.js and TypeScript, because this is the stack that is really simple. And this is something that I'll be covering tomorrow on my talk at For Developers conference. In Node.js, it's much easier to remove the boilerplate and write simple applications and simpler code. In .NET nowadays and C#, you can do the same, but still, the majority of patterns that I show and how the .NET applications are building, then I've typically C# developers love the layers and they boilerplate and writing like a serious applications. And it's undeniable that it's much easier to get the hires in TypeScript or in Node.js. It's just simple. And there are a lot of cheap learning materials to onboard them, etc. So, of course, this is just a long shot. If I have the choice, then of course I would also like to write something in the .NET stack, etc. But if I had the full choice, then that would be probably how I would think about selecting the technology. So I don't think that there are technologies that are better or worse in general, but they are better or worse in the specific context, and that's how we should think about them. Oh, cool. We have a question from the Hunite on the chat. Thanks for that. So the question is, in one of the Architecture Weekly edition, 97th, you mentioned that MS SQL is far behind Postgres. Can you please elaborate on this? Yeah, I think that MS SQL for a long time was like incredibly good database, and I think that Microsoft was pushing into that and have a lot of skin in that game because they were selling licenses, etc. So it was important to move fast with MS SQL and adding more features. Currently, I think that they shift their focus on the Azure and building and databases like Cosmos DB or Azure Blob Storage or any other supporting other databases, because it's much easier for them to build a business model and pricing model on top of cloud native databases like Cosmos, etc. So it's just a business. And MS SQL, I think that it's like built as a classical database. So for example, it's not easy, and this is kind of also for Postgres or MySQL, it's not easy to transition their internals, for example, to build a serverless pricing model, so pay as you go. And Postgres, for a long time, was a database that were really focused on making stuff and the foundations correct. And I think that it was always said that the Postgres database engine is the most well thought engine. And currently, Postgres, at least, of course, this is my perspective, after having this good engine, they are building and adding a lot of features on top of that, like a JSON that is even faster and easier to use than in MongoDB. There are benchmarks that can show that. Of course, there are bigger lies and benchmarks, but still that are at least proves that they are not worse than typical databases like typical document databases. Postgres also allows there is a timescale DB that allows you to use Postgres as a time series. There are also graph databases, etc. You can even run JavaScript with the PLV8, which is kind of getting obsolete, but that's another story. But you can even run JavaScript functions in Postgres. And the most important thing is that the write-ahead lock gives you the possibility to natively have the logical replication, so to push and get the notifications, which is the native built-in mechanism for database. and that's much better than service broker, which is just some service added on top of MS SQL. And of course, MS SQL is still a great database, but I think that the pricing model and even like there is a Linux image for MS SQL, which is good, but still the image is comparing to Postgres is extremely lightweight. And seeing like CockroachDB managed to use the Postgres engine, or at least the assumptions and the Perl SQL in their database, and also seeing like, for example, AWS adding Aurora, or currently that even Microsoft added Postgres, that multi-master version, because they bought Citus and included that into Cosmos DB offering, making it multi-leader, multi-region database. Then that's where my conclusions are coming from. In general, all of the new SQL databases are using Postgres dialect on top of them. So yeah, even AWS DocumentDB, I think it's built on top of Postgres, this Aurora DB on Postgres. So I hope that answer your question. If not, then feel free to send follow-up. Thank you for that question. But yeah, I'm kind of biased because I love Postgres, but that's my observation. Okay, so feel free to ask another questions on chat, and until I saw them, then another one. How do you manage your time? So I already covered some of that, and I can expand that. I'm trying to build my habits and to build the schedule. So currently I'm not actively working as a regular developer inside project. I'm more working with my clients or some my own ideas, etc. So I could, in theory, do more like taking a breaks or building irregular habits, but I like to have some cadence, and so I'm typically working like I would be working in a project base. So I'm starting my day with taking my daughter into kindergarten. That's really nice, especially in the morning to wake up. Then I'm getting back and I'm eating breakfast with my wife. So usually after that it's like 8:30 or 9 a.m. and I'm starting to work on something. It depending on the day. So I already, as you know, have my habits like Architecture Weekly every Monday, trying to send a blog article on Wednesday, but I also have my duties on my project that I'm involved. So depending what's the most important, then I'm doing that. I'm not using any task systems. I'm not having my own Jira. So I'm not great at like having some time management or other applications, or even taking notes about what I should be doing the day. I have pretty good memory, but of course everyone can say that. But yeah, I'm usually trying to figure out in the morning or the day before what's the most important thing that I would like to finish in the specific day. So I'm trying to find something that if I achieve that during that day, then I would be happy. And usually I'm trying to work and take a break like about 12 a.m. when I'm eating some second breakfast. That's something that we are doing in Poland. Traditionally, we are eating second breakfast, not lunch. So I'm also trying to do that with my wife, but this is a rather short break, and taking my daughter from the kindergarten. So I'm usually have the time span of a few hours of work, break down with some personal stuff, and that's also something that I can recommend because I was going pretty deeply into the zone. So when I started to work, then sometimes I get so much into that I wouldn't go out from my desk, maybe just to take some water to drink or go to toilet. But besides that, I was so focused that when I finished my day of work, then I was totally exhausted emotionally because being focused the whole day is just impossible. So if you are taking some breaks, or at least that works for me, if I'm taking some breaks and those breaks don't have anything related to what I'm doing, so to work, then such breaks are helping me to even just be more focused when I'm working and less stressed because I have the time that my brain also is resting a bit and then it can be even more effective. So I don't have anything special about managing my time. I'm just trying to build some habits and stack them together and just do my best. What is quite important that I started to do recently is that I'm trying to cut the distractions, like to find time or even days when I'm answering people through emails or through Discord, so not being constantly pinged by the notifications. And that's also something that I would recommend. In general, I also recommend to not using mobile or computer or not trying to work in the late hours. I did that in the past, but I'm thinking that I'm not capable of doing that because then I'm not having a good sleep. And if I'm not having a good sleep, then the next day is worse. I'm not effective. I'm annoyed, and that's really impacting the whole life, not only work. So yeah, I think that the idea is to get the good balance between and time spans when you are focused on your family life, on your friends, or doing something that won't get you to think about work. Like for me, playing guitar works great. So yeah, finding something and just not trying to do too much. So again, working smart, not hard. Thanks. Good question. I see that there are questions from Vitor. Thank you. So the first one. How would you suggest a team new to event sourcing to embark on this journey and produce a production-ready system? And what are expected pain points and how to minimize them? So my typical recommendation is to not go 100% directly into event sourcing. Even though event sourcing works best if you have more advanced business workflow. It doesn't have to be like a financial system, etc. But it can be like, as I mentioned, the document workflow or any other stuff. So something that has a bit more logic than just a typical CMS or other system where you are just pushing data and then taking it out. So I wouldn't recommend to just start with your core domain, with your core business process. I think that better would be to find out something that is relatively simple, but already has some points that event sourcing could be useful. So that can be probably something that could be some asynchronous process or a process that is built from at least 2 or 3 steps. And once you find out this process, then my recommendation would be to try to model it and implement it. Typically, I would recommend to use some already established tooling, not build event store on your own, um, and try to implement it, see how that plays together, see if that's something that could be helpful for you, and try to get the small bits into production. So best if that is something that is really small that you can do in, let's say, one sprint, so 2 weeks or etc. So something that wouldn't be like a showstopper in the future for you. That because quite often it's like that we are throwing ourselves into uh, some some task, and we are underestimating the complexity of that, and then we are finding out that we are rushing to finish that, and as we are rushing, then typically that's not ending great. And if we go with something really important and blow it out, then the next time, if we try to bring event sourcing or any other tech stack or new tech into our project, then our colleagues would say like, hey, Oscar, you know how that ended the last time you tried to introduce event sourcing? Then no, let's not do that. So I would recommend to start small and start with simple stuff, and then just do something that is like learn on that, deliver that, see how it's working on production, also operational based, and then expand on it. So that's something that I would recommend. And of course, the more preparation we do, the better. So I already have a lot of practical examples, at least in .NET, Java, and TypeScript, about event sourcing. So you could try that. There are also self-paced kits for learning how to do event sourcing for C# and Java. I'm planning to do also the one for Node.js and TypeScript soon. So you could take it, you could even take those exercises and do that with your team, like a hackathon mode, and just play together or do some mob programming exercise, etc., and see how that works for you. Or of course you can get a workshop for me and I can teach you. But yeah, jokes aside, I think that starting small, growing big is something that I would recommend, and also delivering that on production. So if it's small, not important feature, then probably no one will mind if you even failed and you would throw it out. So yeah, that's something that those are my recommendation. I hope that answered your questions. If not, then feel free to follow up. And about the pain points, I think that the bigger pain points are related to modeling and finding out differences between the classical approach and event sourcing. So the best you do during modeling phase, the easier will be for you later on during the implementation phase. So each storage pattern has their own specifics, like relational databases have normalization, document databases have denormalization, and in event sourcing, the most important is to keep streams short living. So, or in general, short with small amount of events. So finding the life cycles. So I think that also working close with the business is something that is good to do, because the closer you work with them, the better understanding you have about the process you want to implement, the better and the easier it will be for you. And I also have the question on my list, when is not a good time to use event sourcing? So I already gave one example about that, but in general, I think that event sourcing can work in any type of IT system. I don't see where it would be even an extreme overhead added, like by design. I think that event sourcing can do well in general in all cases, but sometimes event sourcing won't give you much additional benefit against and comparing to other tooling. Like I mentioned, when we were building the document workflow, then event sourcing would be great matching, but document approach was also good enough. So if we have something that is working and we are fine, then we should not be just trying to do CV-driven design or hype-oriented programming and just change the tech stack or the patterns just because we want to learn something new. Of course, having fun in our work, in our job is important, but not always event sourcing will do a lot more than we have already. But in my opinion, the worst aspect is when our team doesn't want to do event sourcing or is not understanding event sourcing in general. I had also cases in my consulting when one team asked me about their idea and their design about event sourcing, and they also have no understanding of event sourcing. They were making all of the rookie mistakes, so starting from conflating event sourcing with event streaming, taking all those stupid blog articles on how to implement event sourcing using like Kafka, Redis, and just throwing all possible accidental complexity of that. No, I think that if this is the understanding of the team and your team is on the Deming-Kruger peak, so they think that they know a lot, but they in fact doesn't know, and they are just blunt in claiming that, then this is not the good moment to use event sourcing. And on my blog there is also article when not to use event sourcing, and mostly it's about human issues and team issues and organization issues. So yeah. Again, next question. Can database tables storing events with hundreds of database triggers operating on other tables with their own triggers be considered as event sourcing? I think that this, I'm not sure that can be considered event sourcing, but for sure it can be considered as a weird design. I mean, I think that overusing and abusing triggers is in general not a great practice. There might be some use case for using database triggers in event sourcing. Like, for example, we could try to build some sort of push notifications based on database triggers. Okay, I'm back. It seems that my Windows decided that this is the best time to do Windows Update. Sorry for that. I hope that some of you stayed through that break. Yeah, fun times. Okay, so where I was at. So yeah, database triggers, maybe not. So I think that I have one last question, is do you have an example of when an aggregate root becomes too big and how to deal with it? I have an example where there is only one single consistency boundary, but the objects inside the aggregate have two different directions, thus not related. Example, a conference with speakers and participants. Both are bound by the rules of the conference, but the participants are not guarded by speakers and vice versa. But they are each guarded by themselves and the conference boundary. Should this be split into different aggregates or kept and allow the HR to grow, aggregate to grow? If split, how you maintain the aggregate root boundary for both? So yeah, in general, I think that the best way to deal with aggregates is to keep them small, especially in event sourcing. That's extremely important, because if they are small, then typically they are also short-living. And of course, that's always the tricky part, how to maintain consistency. Sometimes we might just say that, okay, for example, we don't have, we cannot have two the same people being a participant on the specific conference, so we don't have double. And if we know that those cases will be extremely rare, then maybe we could just live with them and ignore them and have some mechanism that will be trying to find those duplicates, and we can get some alerts or information or even some automated mechanism of merging those accounts. If that's not a big issue, and quite often our systems don't have extreme load, and the chance that there will be two people doing that at the same time, then it's really rare. Or if we are building internal application, when we precisely know that, for example, on this particular project, there will be only one person putting information there, etc., and the chance for consistency conflicts is low, then maybe we can live with that. But quite often, if we are focused on the modeling, then we can shape our aggregates to be autonomous. Like, the most important and the most effective way of dealing with aggregates is to have them have the good setup of the boundaries. So, for example, if we have cashier shifts on the specific cashier registry in department store, then maybe, for example, if we know that we don't want to duplicate those cashier shifts, that we have only single cashier shift active, then maybe we could do like a numbering. And even if we are using event stores or key value stores or document databases, then we can apply some key key design. By key, I mean the database key, row key design. And typically we can put in the ID whatever we want. And databases like document databases, key value stores, and event stores always allow to have this unique check. And we are mostly afraid about those duplicates and unique constraints, so set-based validations. And there we could put, like, for example, cashier shift underscore or dash shift number, etc. And databases will guard us that we won't have duplicates because the other one will fail. We should also use we can use techniques like optimistic concurrency, etc. And all of that can give us some tooling and help for having this consistency guarantees. And that's also why Kafka is not great for and shouldn't be treated as database. However, sometimes we need to also model our system, and our model process are some asynchronous workflow, because typically the business processes are asynchronous, and we should not be so much afraid of that. And there we need to typically use some mixture of the optimistic and pessimistic concurrency, and optimistic and pessimistic locking. So, for example, yeah, I know that unfortunately it's echoing, sorry for that. Um, so, mm, where I was. So we need to use a mixture of the pessimistic and optimistic locking. So for example, we can have, if we are modeling the process of the guest account checkout, then we can have aggregate that represents this process. So we can have aggregate, which is checkout. And in general, aggregates are kind of good designed if they are based on words, verbs, and processes, not only always representing some physical thing. So we can model as a checkout, and then we can, for example, lock, like let's say that model the key in a way that we know that for this particular room, we have only one checkout process active. So this is kind of pessimistic locking. But then if we are working on this checkout process, then this checkout, as it locked our room for some time when we are making this checkout to be sure that nothing jumps in between, then during that phase, then for the checkout, we can use optimistic concurrency because we don't expect that there will be a lot of actors involved there and many people that could do this checkout process at the same time. So then we can have a lowered guarantees and just use optimistic concurrency. And after this checkout is finished, then again, we can mark the room as checked out. We can close the checkout process, mark this as finished, and unlock the account, or just state that the reservation and the guest state is completed. So typically it's a mixture of the pessimistic, optimistic locking and the distributed processes asynchronous processes like Saga and or process managers or choreography. So I also have a few articles about that, and there is, I think, pretty decent webinar that we did together on the Architecture Weekly paid subscribers community, and I encourage you to sign for it. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. Yeah. And this is the last question that I have on my list. And are there any questions from the viewers on the chat window? If you have them, then feel free to ask them, because if not, then I will be wrapping it out. So thank you a lot for being here, for watching this live Q&A. I hope that if you like it, then please ping me, drop me a note, whether it was good or not, whether I should continue and do more stuff like that. We could even get on the call, and if you are interested, then you can bring your own topic and we could try to crunch it together, and then other people could benefit from that. Sorry for those technical issues. So like this echo and this Windows update break. But yeah, I hope that you had fun. If you are watching that from re-recording, then yeah, thank you for being here, for being the viewer, the reader of the Architecture Weekly. And yeah, I really encourage you and invite you to join the paid community, because then we have Discord channel, we have more webinars and more discussions like that. And if not, then yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. I don't see any more questions on the chat, so thank you for those that joined and asked the questions. I was at the beginning afraid that I won't get much question, but it seems that there were some. So thank you. Bye. Have a good day.